On November 13th, 1974, Ronald Joseph Defeo Jr. murdered his entire family as they slept. The media swarmed around the house as law enforcement removed all of his siblings and his parents' bodies. In December of 1975, George and Kathleen Lutz moved into the home on 112 Ocean Avenue where the murders took place, knowing full well of the house's history. After 28 days, the family fled the house, leaving all their possessions behind. Hi, this is D.S. Yaxheimer, and this is another episode of The Spectre. I'm going to be talking about, of course, the Amityville Horror, particularly the true story behind it, not the films, and the murder, the Lutz's subsequent poltergeist when they moved in. Of course, just before the opening there was a little bit about the Defeo murders and the Lutz's. Just the dates and times and things. Just a brief little synopsis there. So, the thing about the murders that's peculiar is that when Butch Defeo went through the house, Butch is his nickname, he shot his brothers and sisters and his parents with a shotgun. I think it was called a... can't remember the name of it exactly. It's not important. Big fucking shotgun though. Big rifle. Very loud. And this is a residential neighborhood in Amityville. It's a rather residential, affluent neighborhood. Imagine there's really not a lot of crime. So he went through this big Dutch colonial house. It's usually on the cover of the books, but that's the house, of course. You always know, and it's a big house. But of course, you could hear a shotgun go off in one room, and a lot of people argue, well, why didn't any of the family members try to get out of bed and escape if he was going around with a shotgun? Imagine you'd be pretty scared and terrified if someone was going in your house and they were shooting people. I don't know how anyone would react. They're all upstairs. They'd probably be difficult to jump out a window or anything like that, and they were children. His sister Dawn was 18. She was, but the rest of the kids were pretty young. The sisters and brothers were quite young, so they would have been terrified. So that's perhaps why they didn't. They might have been paralyzed with fear because you don't know where to run in that situation. I mean, I'm sure they're quite a bit taken off guard, even though there was quite a bit of violence in the Defeo home, particularly from the between the father and the son. There's some interesting theories behind it. Ronald Defeo worked for his father-in-law's. The father worked for his father-in-law's car dealership in I think it was in Brooklyn. Pretty sure. Get your facts straight. Always important to get your facts straight before you do a video discussing a particular topic, especially this, because all the details are pretty well known for the most part. And so anyway, he the Defeo his in-laws were rumored to be linked with organized crime, which is quite speculation. And Ron Defeo's father-in-law was paying the mortgage on the house. He couldn't afford to live in a house like that. They were living in a smaller apartment, and the father-in-law, Ronald Defeo Sr.'s father-in-law, wanted them to live in a nicer place because they had a lot of kids. So they moved them to the big house out there on 112 Ocean Ave. And the family, and there's of course conflicting testimonials from friends of theirs and stuff like that. But he was pretty violent. He was very abusive towards towards Butch Defeo's mother. Supposedly, and presumably the family lived, in fear. I'm only presuming. I don't know. No, none of us were there. So this is what possibly culminated in these murders, coupled with the fact that Butch Defeo had a very out of control drug problem with heroin, and he did acid, drinking, all of that. His father gave him. He worked at the car dealership with him, but his father gave him a lot of money too. His father was very abusive, but he was very generous with his allowance or stipend, which exceeded his income from working at the car dealership. So he spent a lot of his time partying, doing drugs. He was obviously quite psychotic, and push came to shove, and Butch got in his head to kill his parents. Now, some people think there was more people involved, and there's stories that go with that. Some think there was another friend of theirs who was Butch's, who was dating the oldest daughter, Dawn. He was exonerated. I guess he wasn't, or pretty much they couldn't make a concrete case for him being involved with it, but he was supposedly there that night. It was like Butch, Dawn, and this other individual who the name sort of escapes me right now. It's not mentioned. It's not a commonly discussed conspiracy theory for this whole thing, but they were all sort of involved with. They're supposedly involved with the murder. I don't really buy into it myself, but supposedly Dawn wanted, the parents killed, and Butch they had a dispute at one point after the other guy left to supposedly get rid of I don't know if he was going to get rid of one of the guns used, but basically the only gun that was used was the big rifle shotgun. So supposedly that's how Dawn got shot, was they were fighting over the gun because Dawn wanted to shoot the kids because they didn't want witnesses. And that's why she got killed. That's one of the stories that Ronald Defeo has floated. He's changed his story a lot of times over the years. He did admit to it during the trial, and there was, of course, the demonic possession, defense, which is kind of where the Lutzes come in at one point later on, because his attorney, and I think his name was William Weber, he met with the Lutzes at one point, and they were drinking and stuff like that, and they cooked up this whole story of the house, being basically the house is demonic, and it's it has like a demon living in it, or it's poltergeist, or whatever you want to call it. And that's where the Lutz's story basically starts, the hoax, which I believe it's a hoax personally, but that's and they recorded this conversation for the purposes of putting to market it for the eventual book, and the book went to Jay Anson to write. So the deal between Defeo's attorney and the Lutzes that fell apart, but he still had the tape of them discussing it, and it sort of is one of the things that discredits the Lutzes, haunting story or poltergeist or whatever it is, because they stated that the house had the walls were bleeding, and He would hear marching bands, and they were levitating off the bed, and God, what else? He kept cutting wood and making a fire in the fireplace. He kept the house really warm. He said he was cold all the time, and just personality changes. One of the sons said in another documentary, which is called My Amityville Horror, I think it was Danny Lutz, George Lutz's stepson, Kathy Lutz's real son, because she had kids with a previous marriage. Danny Lutz said that his stepdad levitated a wrench off the wall, off the fucking wall, and he summoned it to him in the garage when he was hanging out with people talking. Of course, where are these other people to corroborate this story that George Lutz had, like fucking Magneto powers to do this shit? And the dog started acting funny. The dog was hanging over the fence at one point, and they had to rescue the dog from choking because it got hung up on the fence on its leash somehow. And the dog was, of course, barking and acting up like something's wrong, and all of this. I mean, and so it doesn't really add up to there being this being truthful. Of course, there's a lot of people, who are in the paranormal profession, if you want to call it that, who have given this story enough credence for it to become a horror movie franchise, really. It helped that. And they've been making movies. I reviewed one just recently, The Amityville, The Awakening, which was so bad they kept moving the release date around, and eventually it just came out on video. They released it last October in select cities, but it was a like all of them, just not a good movie, and not a good horror movie, and not a compelling. Well, the first movie is just the one with Margot Kidder and James Brolin is just a cheesy horror movie. It's really what it is. It was just made to capitalize on the success of the book and the notoriety of the story, because they think it's a true story. People thought this shit really happened, and and to this day, Ronald Defeo, he's still serving time in prison for killing his whole family. And any of the recent interviews I've seen, I mean, he's occasionally they talk to him. He just talks like this. Yeah, well, I am the Amityville Horror. Just well, Dawn wanted to freaking shoot the kids, and that's where I drew the line. He'll say stuff like that. He's nuts, and he is a complete fucking sociopath. He doesn't have any regard for, or I think, genuine empathy. All the psychologists, criminal psychologists that I've interviewed, and concur with that. And he doesn't, that's the case with him. It is kind of, I mean, yeah, it is sort of hard to believe that he was able to shoot everyone and they stayed in their beds. I think that's kind of what I was trying to come up with a plausibility to how that could be. I don't know. I think it happened within a relatively short time frame when he started shooting them to when he killed everyone. So I don't think they had a lot of time to react in the middle of the night. It's you have no idea what sort of situation was going on in that house. I mean, obviously it has to be pretty bad for the oldest son to shoot the entire family. So if that maybe, and perhaps there is some credence to some other conspiracy theories that it could have been related to organized crime. It could be related to the car dealership and its connection to, even though this is complete speculation, it has nothing to do with anything that's been discovered, really. It's based on some just the behavior of the family and maybe, just some of the peripheral people that the Defeos knew and were related to. But it's not really, it has nothing to do with what anybody really knows. But I mean, it's, I don't know why the mob would come in and just come and shoot the entire family and leave Butch live. Maybe just as as their patsy, someone to take the blame for it all. And he was just, stupid enough to go along with it. I don't really buy that. I guess I would have to go with somehow he just did it on his own. And what happened is he went to work, I think, that day with his family lying dead in the house. And then he went down to the local bar and just said to people, "Oh yeah, my family's been murdered." He went down to the bar, because that's what you do when you find your family killed in the house. Is you go down to the local bar, like, "My family's been killed." So yeah, the police went there and they discovered the whole thing, and it was awful. It was just really fucked up. And to this day, there's nobody. He hasn't really. He's still serving time for it. That's really the official story, is that he murdered his whole family. And as far as Kathy Lutz and George Lutz are concerned, they died in the early 2000s. I just got it up here. Kathy died of emphysema in 2004, and George died in 2006 of heart disease. So I guess it wasn't ghosts that got him in the end after all. It was, lung and heart disease, pretty much natural causes. Well, yeah, I mean, she smoked a lot. They both smoked quite a bit. If you see old clips of them, a lot of people, of course, 70s, people just smoked and shit. There wasn't you can't smoke anywhere now. Not that this has anything to do with it, but that's how they died. Just of, a demon didn't kill them. And from all intents and purposes, nothing happened to them in the house. All the stories, the door blew off. The door was intact after they vacated the home after they were there for 28 days. It was about 28 days when they moved in December of 1975. One of the upper dormer windows, which is what I'm talking about, is the trademark windows of the upper, would be considered, it's kind of an attic, but they have a finished attic up there as rooms. One of them supposedly blew out. It didn't. It was the same original window and hadn't been repaired. So they lied so much about stuff that, considering how close of proximity that the neighbors live around them and everything else, there should have been witnesses to corroborate their stories. And that's the thing. They just didn't. Did anybody come over and visit and see anything, and experience all these things? There's just not. You have children. You have the two adults, and the house is full of the 3 children there. So you can't believe what a kid tells you at that age, because if an adult tells you there's ghosts in the house, there's ghosts in the house. So I think that's really the biggest problem with the whole Amityville horror, is that the everybody who the living witnesses still say the same made up shit. The 2 kids, the 2 sons. It's the daughter. I think her name's might be Missy. She doesn't do any of that. She just lives a normal private life. She doesn't go out. As far as I know, she hasn't done any interviews or anything. But the other 2 have, and they corroborate the story. They hate George. They hated George. He was an awful stepfather. They didn't like him at all. He was abusive and just kind of a dick, from what they told him. But they do say that the house was possessed and there was something there, and it was, doing all kinds of crazy things. And those ones, Danny said that his fingers got caught in the window, and his fingers got jammed, and the window couldn't be opened, and all that, and he had to go to the ER and stuff, and the windows were slammed shut by, of course, demons, and pretty much everything else. The stuff that was in the movie wasn't really their original story, I guess, from what they say, and everything, all the movies, the endless, countless fucking movies. Some of them were TV movies. I mean, it just went into, like, it franchised out, and it franchised sort of down. There was even a movie about a possessed lamp that was bought at a yard sale at the Amityville house, and they took it to another house, so the whole book, possessed lamp, somebody pitched that, and that became a movie. So you can basically just make up whatever story you want from the Amityville horror, and it can become a shitty movie, and go straight to, on demand or whatever, DVD dollar bin at Walmart, pretty much. And because the story in and of itself is only supported by true believers, parapsychologists, demonologists, and those sorts of people who investigate this thing, and because they want to believe in it. And the other people out there who want to believe in it, they'll believe in it too. I don't. I think it's an intriguing story. It's interesting how it became such a phenomenon. But it doesn't hold any water. It just sounds like people who made up a bunch of shit, and they made money off of it. The Lutzes made a little bit of money off of it. They didn't really, But that's the thing. I mean, I think they made reportedly $300,000 from the publishing deal or something like that, which is a pretty good chunk of change back then, especially from some piss poor made up story. It's not even a good horror story, honestly. I mean, I think it was pretty fucking lame. It was. I just thought it was lame. I always thought the movie was lame. But they're making another one. I think it's like another Defeo prequel, sort of reboot. So that's coming out probably straight to video or something like that. But it's the story is. I mean, on the book, it says, this book will scare the hell out of you. See that there? You can believe that. You can believe the Kansas City Star. It's probably some newspaper that doesn't exist anymore. And the other book I have is by Hans Holzer. I had this book, actually, I showed these books in my previous video when I did the Amityville The Awakening review. And I think the story is as bad as that movie is, really, the original story. It's full of holes. It's fucking fake. I mean, you have to think about a couple that would go buy a house that was a little bit out of their means, and I don't think that had much to do with making the story up necessarily, but and they maybe they were true. Maybe they just believed what they were saying and concocting. Belief is a powerful thing. But no, I don't believe the Amityville horror was real. And I think the murders were real. I'm not exactly sure how they were perpetrated. But yeah. That's my take on it. If you happen across this video and you have any comments, I'd be interested in hearing them. And on the paranormal, or the Amityville story, or or criticisms of this video. That's perfectly fine too. Open to that. Always open to criticism. This is DS Yoxheimer. This has been another edition of The Spectre. Later.